Friends, have you ever experienced sleep paralysis? It's when you're sleeping and suddenly, in a daze, you feel like you can't breathe and you can't move. Welcome to today's story, which takes place in my friend Xiaowu. In the hot summer month of September, Xiaowu saved money by renting an affordable house near his workplace. The house was a one-bedroom apartment with a separate living room and bathroom in an old, partitioned building. The decor was minimal, consisting of just a whitewashed wall and a simple partition between the bedroom and living room. When Xiaowu first entered the house, aside from the faint smell of mold or something burning, he didn't notice anything unusual. However, what made him curious was that there was a large gap of about 18 centimeters on the top of the partition wall between the bedroom and living room. He suspected that the landlord might have miscalculated the distance during renovations, so the partition board was shorter than it should have been. Since he was living alone, he decided to move in anyway. However, since moving into the house, Xiaowu started feeling uneasy. Every time he fell asleep, he would hear someone walking around behind the partition wall in the living room. But when he got up to investigate, the sound would disappear. This happened for 3 or 4 days before Xiaowu became used to it and assumed it was due to poor sound insulation from the neighboring house. 1 week later, one night after Xiaowu went out drinking with some colleagues, he came back very late. Lying in bed, he quickly fell asleep. At around 2 a.m., he suddenly felt short of breath and struggled to breathe. The sensation of suffocation woke him up. He tried to open his eyes but couldn't see anything. Fortunately, he remained conscious and his breathing wasn't as difficult as before. He began deep breathing in his blanket. Just then, Xiaowu heard footsteps approaching from behind the partition wall in the living room. He opened his eyes slightly and saw movement outside his blanket. It was as if someone was standing right behind him. He tried to shout but nothing came out. His heart raced as he wondered what was happening. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped and everything went quiet again. Xiaowu managed to calm down and continue breathing deeply inside his blanket. Just then, he heard a sound similar to snoring. The sound was loud and seemed to be coming from inside his blanket. Moreover, the snoring would vary with his breathing speed. While Little Wu was confused, he suddenly felt someone touch his head with a long-nailed hand. The hand slowly slid down his back from the back of his head. When it reached his lower back, Little Wu couldn't take it anymore and let out a scream, waking up instantly. He sat up and realized that he was not sleeping in the bedroom but lying on the floor of the living room wrapped in a blanket. This scared him badly, and he stayed awake until dawn without any movement. He thought it might be because of the excessive pressure he was under. After daybreak, he returned to the bedroom and continued to sleep. However, when he woke up again, he felt unwell all over, especially with a severe sore throat that made even drinking water uncomfortable. His head was also dizzy, indicating that he was sick. So he took some medicine to alleviate the symptoms. Until evening, he fell asleep early again. But in the middle of the night, he was pinned down again. At that time, Little Wu was lying in bed. Due to the heat in the south, last night's experience filled him with fear. Without covering himself with a blanket, he only wore a long shirt and lay on the bed. Firstly, he felt extremely uncomfortable as if someone was scratching and poking him painfully. This feeling made him slowly open his eyes. In that instant when he opened his eyes, he saw a head in the empty space above the partition wall in the bedroom. The eyes were particularly large and stared straight at him. Little Wu was so scared that he immediately closed his eyes. During the following time, he endured this painful feeling. In the end, he didn't know how he fell asleep. After waking up, he hurriedly checked his body and found that there were no scratches on him. But last night's feeling was incredibly real. Of course, the head had disappeared by then. Could he still continue to live in this house? He quickly called the landlord and described this incident to him. The landlord honestly told him, this house had been burned down in May. The walls of the room were blackened and charred. Later, to save money, the landlord did not renovate carefully but only scraped off a layer of white paint and used a lower foam wall to partition the room. Finally, the landlord compensated Little Wu for some money as an apology. Little Wu had no choice but to leave that house. As for what happened afterwards, no one knows. Today's story ends here. If you like it, you can share it with more people. See you tomorrow.